in round 2, December 19th, 1957. He's facing Herbert Seidman, who was a senior master. Right here, he's just below senior master at 2386. Seidman was born in New York on October 17th, 1920. He passed away August 30th, 1995. And at his peak, Herbert Seidman was in the top 10 players of the United States. He won the New York State Chess Championship both in 1961 and 1971. We have E4 and C5, the Sicilian defense, Knight F3 and D6 from Bobby Fischer. D4, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn. We get an open variation, Knight F6, Knight C3, and of course, Najdorf's variation, bishop to G5, pawn E6, and I'm not sure, this is a combination between Scheveningen and Najdorf, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty fluid. F4, bishop E7, queen F3, queen C7 is the traditional line in Najdorf's variation. Queenside castles, H6 hits that bishop, and here's a variation we don't see too often. Brown's variation, and that's named for Walter Brown, Walter Sean Brown, who was born in Sydney, Australia. His mother was Australian, his father was American. Walter Brown was born January 10th, 1949. He passed away June 24th, 2015. And when he was young, he lived both in Australia and the United States at various times. In fact, he won the 1969 Australian Chess Championship, and he became a Grandmaster in 1970. Walter Brown played first board for Australia at the Siegen Olympiad in 1970 and at the Skopje Olympiad in 1972. And he was known as Mr. Six-Time for his 6 U.S. championship titles. That has only been exceeded by Bobby Fischer and Sammy Reshevsky, 6 titles. But he also won a variety of other open tournaments, 2 U.S. Opens, 7 American Opens, 11 National Opens. He won the 1991 Canadian Open. He had first place finishes at Venice in 1971, at Huygens in 1974, at Winnipeg in 1974, the Pan American Championship. He won at Lone Pine in 1974. He won at Mannheim in 75, at Reykjavik in 78. He won Huygens again in 80. He won in Chile in 1981. He won the first Ladies' Cup in 1982, and that was a 26-player round robin. Wow. It wasn't the first Ladies' Cup, it was the first Ladies' Cup. Come on now. He won the New York Open, Walter Brown did, in 1983. He won at Gjovik in 1983. He won the Nimzovich Memorial Tournament in 1985. He was a top competitor at Blitz Chess, and in 1988 he formed the World Blitz Chess Association. He was inducted into the United States Chess Hall of Fame in 2003, and he remained competitive at top-level tournaments up until the time of his death. In fact, he died in Las Vegas on June 24th, 2015, having just tied for the 9th to 15th spots at the National Open. So, Brown's variation, Walter Sean Brown. Now, Knight C6 was played. The book move is Knight BD7. Bobby with Knight C6. Knight BD7 is the book move, which is answered by Bishop E2 and Pawn B5. Let's go back. Instead, Bobby with Knight C6, and that knight is traded. Bishop D3 here. Better and more common is Bishop E2. Bishop D7. Queen E2 gets a question mark, but the eval bar says white is a splinter better. Rook C8. King B1. Pawn B5. And I was thinking that black could play follow the king and play queen b6, so I'm interested to know. I get a check mark. Pawn b5, king's rook to f1. Ooh, that gets a double question mark. That's a harsh evaluation from the bot. I'll say it again that I've said before. To me, a blunder is a move that loses the game. The eval bar showing fairly equal, and it was at 0.6 here. And it's at, okay, it's quite a shift. It's at 0.3 here, but it's not even a full pawn shift. Anything between 1 and -1 should be considered equal, especially at our level. But, you know, these grandmasters, they know how to play. You really should view mistakes that are a point or less as inaccuracies, mistakes that are between a point and 3 as mistakes, and mistakes that are greater than 3 as blunders. That's my opinion. There's no solid science behind it. I don't know what the mathematical formula is that chess.com uses to determine what constitutes a blunder. But if you go from being slightly better to slightly worse, I could hardly call that a blunder. So I've long struggled with some of these annotations. It seems like the annotations have been revised. There's something that the bot is seeing that I'm not seeing. So e5 was recommended by the bot, which compels a trade. This is the move the bot indicated with the green arrow, which forces black to take. And then white takes back, hitting the knight again. The knight comes to d5, and it seems okay to me. In fact, white has given himself an isolated pawn. No human being is going to do that without being able to show any definite benefit. I'm not going to give myself an isolated pawn in the middle of the board if I can't show that it yields dividends. So this is a clear bot bias, if you will. All right, so rook hf1 played. b4 from Fischer. Well, maybe this is the point, that not so much what does it provide white, but what does it keep black from doing? You know, this move is quite forceful, isn't it? And when you play this, now your knight gets out of any pressure by trading itself off. So that's my guess. Not to mention that the king gets left in the middle of the board with queens still on the board. So there is that. That's a harsh reality. For this king to be in the middle of the board with queens still on the board, that could be problematic in the long run. So it's really subtle, though. It's a positional consideration. So I guess we'll have to call that a positional blunder then. And it does allow black this initiative, doesn't it? But there's a line, and in fact, I've seen lines where the knight can come right here to d5, even though it doesn't seem possible. Seidman played bishop takes knight, but what would happen if we played the knight here? I get a check mark. Okay, it doesn't like it. My point is, after takes with the pawn, then bishop takes the knight, you cannot open this file. So you'd have to take with the pawn, and you're left with isolated, doubled isolated, and a bishop that can't really move. I'm going to take this, and I probably dare not take here, because if I do, okay, get a check mark. It started out inaccurate, but look, you know, hello. All right, well, the bot really being persnickety with me today, but you guys get it. Okay, Seidman with bishop takes knight, and Bobby, interestingly, plays pawn takes bishop anyway, perhaps anticipating the knight to d5. Yeah, that's actually what Seidman played here, knight d5, and gets a star. So he played the same thing that I just recommended, only reverse the move order. He takes d5, he takes d5, and yeah, he doesn't dare take this pawn. He comes here so that he can step back here if this battery is formed, because that threatens checkmate on the magic square. In fact, I would have played it. I would have maybe this rook. This rook's not doing anything. Seidman took the pawn and hit the rook here. I'd really be interested in king's rook to e1. Threatens checkmate and therefore forces queen d8. At first marked inaccurate, and then it changed its mind. I wonder what the bot initially saw when it marked it inaccurate. I mean, it's forced, isn't it? Oh, I guess I could play my bishop. I could play my bishop and discover a defense. That also gets a star. I was like, what else is there? That's true. You could play that as well. Actually, now that I look at it, I like the bishop b5 better than the queen d8. But they both get stars. Anyway, bishop takes the pawn on a6, rook b8. Rook a8 is apparently the best. King's rook to e1 here. Bobby with bishop c8. Bishop f5 does deserve consideration. Well, bishop takes c8. Black feels like black's in a bit of trouble here, even though the eval bar says he's fine. I'd feel a little bit uncomfortable, but rook takes c8, you know, I've got some threats now of my own. Your queen becomes, at least for a moment, tethered to this pawn. Rook d4, and that's aiming for rook c4. Bobby castles here. That's remarkable. He takes advantage of the fact that this battery, the queen is overworked, isn't it? Well, it's tethered, maybe not overworked. But the point is, you cannot take this bishop, even though you got two attackers and only one defender. You dare not take it or you're deflection mated. You've seen this a million times if you've done puzzles here at chess.com. Puzzle Rush in particular, you'll get it 4 or 5 times in one Puzzle Rush series. If takes, bada bing, forces the king over. Bada boom, double exclam, thank you, that's my third one of the night, but that one played itself, and bada bye-bye, checkmate. By the way, grabbing this pawn is also wrong. That gets a question mark. I'll play something like f5. Double exclam! Double exclam, that's 4. I mean, maybe you can play b3. That gets a star. All right, well, rook e4 was played, and that gets an exclam. King's rook to e8, pawn f5. Obviously, we don't want to capture the bishop here either. Even though we've got one more guy, it doesn't change a thing because I've got one more guy now. So it's literally the same thing. It's just different. Other than that, it's exactly the same. You're busted. So f5, king h7, c3, gets a big red X. And all the other comments are still true. You don't want to take the pawn and allow bishop d8, discovering an attack on the queen, right? And it's just, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Ladles and jelly spoons, that's 5. And the point is, again, you self-mate if you take that rook. Same thing. And I'll might as well get a 6th double exclam because I got a double exclam when I played it before. I'm not going to count it as 6 because it's the same double exclam as before. It's just different. Hey, I'll count them if they give them to me. We take them any way we can get them, right, guys? I mean, technically the position was different. Anyway, c3. Pawn takes pawn. Now rook takes the bishop. Queen b6. What a move. The bot saying queen b8. This is a move and a half. This is literally the same thing. It's just different. My goodness. How's that get an inaccuracy? I mean, this is really interesting. He's letting him get a free tempo here for this pressure. This is amazing. Obviously, we're going to just show it one more time that this is still wrong because the queen is overworked in this example tied to the magic square. It's just tied to a different square and the queen cannot take or it's checkmate. But rook takes f7 check. King g8, queen g4 check. Oh my goodness. Well, that eval bar is dead equal. Oh, and they accepted a draw here. Ah, okay. Somehow I didn't realize this was a drawn game. I was going to say, how did Bobby win this? Yeah, because the bot is fickle. That's why. I don't know that it to me. Okay, you connect with these rooks. Maybe that has an impact. But it doesn't, to me, it doesn't change a thing. Come back. Because don't we get the same exact... Oh, there's a blunder here. Huh. I guess because it makes this a blunder. I thought it was the same thing. Because if I... Okay. Ah, because you don't play king g8 here. You play king h8. Oh, and the queen can't escape. Oh, my goodness. This hurts my brain. Right? Can't take the rook because you're double protected and you can't go too far from this and the queen's overworked. So I take it, you take, and there's your checkmate, right? This is amazing. Okay, so it didn't seem like much of a diff, but it's quite a diff, apparently. Queen b6 allows the forced mate, the forced draw. You can't play king h8 here because now I can sacrifice my queen because I'm getting it here, check and checkmate. So that means king g8 is forced, and now the check, and now it's a repetition. They agreed to a draw here because you just play queen g6 and go back and forth. The rook cuts the king off over here, so you're just forced back and forth. Right, repetition. Yeah, now, to me, that's actually quite an inaccuracy that really made quite a difference. Let's come back to that real quick. So you cannot play this. You'd have to play something else. What would white have to play? Well, his only move, white's only move here. No, you can't. That loses. That loses. Don't forget, this queen is tethered to the b-man. So if you take anyway, right, you lose this rook because the queen has to defend this pawn, which means it cannot take this rook because of the threat of checkmate. So white would have to come up with something else. He has to he has to maintain the defense of the pawn. Oh, and he has to stop the pawn from pushing as well. So he has to come here. He has to blockade. The eval bar stays in the center, so I'm right. The thing is, you can't just, you obviously can't come here because it's hot. And if you come over here, then I've got c2. And that is lost. You're toasted there as well. Wow. That is remarkable. Note that if he comes to c8, wow, the bot's saying his best move was to take the pawn. And as you can see here, we get queen takes pawn check. Seven. Well, the point is here, guys, you've got to understand the technique that we're using here. I don't know why I get a double exclam for a well-known technique. The point is you're decoying the kings and vacating the promotion square. So you're trading off a rook and you're picking up a pawn, but more importantly, you're getting an initiative, right? King comes to b3, queen c3 check, king has to come to a4, rook c4 check, and it's simple checkmate after that, ladder style. Seven double exclams. Hey, that matches my record from 2 or 3 weeks ago. 7 double exclams. And we'll just thank my dad for this one. My dad is he who taught me this little technique. We're so averse to giving up our queen for this pawn, but we're not. Our queen is still on the board. It's just sleight of hand. 7 double exclams. And I still have 2 more games to go, so maybe I'll break the record. All right, so with that, then, queen b6 is inaccurate. Oh, and we started to say if he plays this, then white has to play here. And the eval bar is dead center. Okay, so that game was drawn. Draw agreed because there's a forced repetition. Really nice game. Let's give you the numbers. Seidman's accuracy was 90.9. Bobby's was 91.3. Seidman's single game rating assessment was 2600. Bobby 2650. Pretty competitive game. The opening for both sides was amazing, and they both navigated the middle game pretty well.